let's start. Let's start the panel that is called Shaping Friends, Duping Enemies, Russian Information Projection. It's my pleasure to be a moderator of this discussion. Let me first of all introduce ourselves, our speakers. Then I would like to declare the rules of the game for our discussion. And then I would like to have some maybe introductory remarks, some questions to start with, and to follow by our panelists. So in no particular order, next to me sitting is Vykintas Pugačiauskas, senior international news editor from our Lithuanian public broadcaster. Then we have Mykolas Katkus, a PR leading expert in Lithuania, and he is representing VRP Hill and Alton Strategies. Professor Gintautas Mažeikis, he's a philosopher and expert in propaganda, a very interesting blend to listen and to hear his thoughts on from Vytautas Magnus University. From Vilnius, from Kaunas, sorry, put your university in Vilnius. Yeah. And Estonian local expert, consultant on strategic communication, and a friend of ours, Raul Rabane. And myself, Nerijus Maliukevičius from Vilnius University, Institute of International Relations and Political Science. I would say information conflict and information warfare expert. So a pleasure is ours to be on the panel, to be invited here to discuss this. Rules of the game for the panel, if I may declare them as I'm the moderator. We will give 10 minutes maximum for panelists to present their remarks, interruptions to the following topic. And I hope we will leave the majority of time for discussion. And let's have it into discussion and then to some thoughts during that period. As a starter, from my perspective maybe, on this topic, I should probably relate things that already have been said in previous panels and then from our keynote speakers about information projection. And I would probably relate this to the things that were said during a previous panel on military reform and military projection, when we had speakers looking into how the military was reformed by years, by numbers, and how the Russian campaign or Kremlin's campaign in Ukraine was prepared for years. I think one can relate this the same to information projection, or I would say information geopolitics of Putin in the region. What I mean by that is probably we can take this approach and start looking into how the information tool or media tool was shaped into a kind of a weapon or a conflict tool throughout the decades. I'm not into giving out dates, probably that's a question for discussion, but one could probably pick a year 2013 with the December 9th reorganization of RIA Novosti and then molding a government media tool into real propaganda tool via people, via budget, via many other issues. Or maybe one could pick up a year 1995, where in Latvia a known company at the time TEM Art or TEM TV was moving into being an intermediary in Russian ORT channel and then becoming later the prominent Baltic Media Alliance and then the holder of this whole media empire, I would say, in the Baltics. But the idea here from my side is that one probably has to look in this endeavor of Kremlin and Putin in the media realm, similarly as we did already for some time into energy geopolitics. And we lived through that, been there, done that, but suddenly we realized that probably things look similar in the information realm as well. Maybe we should think the same way we did into countering energy geopolitics in the region, and maybe thinking about how in media realm we have offshoring of businesses in European Union and how this is used and abused for very aggressive propaganda, how the intermediaries are used to create very powerful aggressive propaganda tools and so on and so forth. So just from my intro here, I would urge our panelists and then a discussion to move forward into probably this perspective, how this media realm that would be considered a democratic context in our realm became a weaponized issue or a tool of geopolitics. And maybe let's look into questions like how much of Soviet inertia we can follow now in nowadays Sputnik projects. How can this be related to even Sovinformbureau endeavors in Second World War, and then AP Novosti endeavors in Cold War, and then and so on? Are there really relations to those Soviet experiences? And where are the boundaries? We already, yesterday in the evening, discussed some of that, but let's put it on the table for the discussion. Where are the boundaries between military communication strategies like active measures, reflexive control, or strategiczная маскировка, and real public media endeavors or governmental endeavors? Are they separated in Kremlin's perspective? Are they mixed? Are they deliberately mixed? And things like that. So that's it from my perspective. I would like to invite, by the same order probably, Vykintas to throw his thoughts and make an interruption. And let's move bit by bit into this complex question. I think you can use here.
All right, okay. Good afternoon. Well, since we're talking about propaganda as a tool in geopolitics, then we have to somehow reflect on the spheres of influence. And my view is, well, I will be talking mostly not actually from the media perspective, but from the societal perspective. When we talk about spheres, there are, I think, two things that need to be said, and that sort of show that we're dealing with rather old information warfare here in this sphere, whereas the countries further west probably deal with something newer. So unfortunately, there are two problems, and media are only instrumental in showing those problems. So the first problem is that still, society-wise, we're still belonging to the post-Soviet sphere, and our societies are different from the Western societies. And the second problem is that our societies react to propaganda in a different way than the West. Basically, both the media and the societies at large, they respond in a different way. I think both things are alarming, and also, as I've said, they're not so much directly related with what Russia does as much as with what we are, and that's sort of even more difficult to change. They showcase weaknesses. So when we look, of course, at what Russia does, there's been something of a shift in the recent years, not least probably in Putin's mind. And that's also showcased by the fact that suddenly the EU association agreement suddenly became a big thing for Russia, whereas before it was NATO and hard power that Russia said to be opposing. So America was always the enemy, but somehow Europe used to be a sort of reference point. Euro-remont and things like that were sort of, markers that Russia sort of belonged to this European civilization. Something changed. America, in Russia's probably mindset, subjugated Europe, and so now Europe is obviously the enemy to a large extent, as America was, and that sort of changed the way things are presented in the Russian media. So basically, now Russia can legitimately, to its own people, to its own population, claim that Russia is a counterpoint to the Western values. Now, this approach only works in Russia itself. You cannot really go out to the West and say that, yes, there we are, brave Russians. And I've read a text about Valdai's speech about the mistake of inviting Westerners to show that, oh yes, but it is us who are superior to you. That was compared to someone inviting Westerners to a lecture of how the blood revenge is superior to the Western justice, or how the intermarriages between castes in India are better than freely choosing your partner. So basically, this Russia as a counterpoint works mostly for the Russian sphere, whereas the other approach that's applied elsewhere is basically to show the West as being hypocritical, to multiply various versions of truth, to make question the reality, to make question the entire system of values. That's also evident in Russia, but is also very evident in the West, and we've discussed about how things are panning out in Germany. The problem is that if we think about, well, two propaganda departments, one talking about this Russian version propaganda, and then the Western version of the propaganda, trouble is we, by the virtue of our societies, we're still probably belong to the department that oversees propaganda domestically. And by no means I don't want to diminish the progress that the Baltic societies have made, no. But still, the research show that the electorate and the society in general is still cynical about the institutions, about democracy, not used to debates, not used to criticism, anti-modern in their economic activity. They try to not to use the market institutions as much as in the West, but to try to do things themselves. They believe in irrational things, conspiracy theories, big power conspiracies, and things like that. So basically, if we accept that the power of propaganda is not countering the established wisdom, but sort of amplifying the views that are already held, I think this is why the Russian propaganda is so potent. Basically, it exploits cynicism here, It exploits the feeling of inefficacy, the crudeness, the sort of the harsh ways of doing things. We've moved very far, but there are a lot of things in our societies that hark back to the Soviet past. In the West, it's a different case. In Western Europe, society has different weaknesses. They're too politically correct. So the second type of propaganda probably is more successful in tapping into those weaknesses. But there it sort of aims mostly at the fringes of the societies. Whereas here we can say that the Russian propaganda is still aiming at the core of the societies. Just recently, in a discussion of political scientists, we had the same research data showing that in Lithuania, over 50% still view the Soviet era positively. So there's a lot to tap into that. And so that's one problem. And the other problem, as I've said, our reaction to propaganda is different from the West. Actions in countering the propaganda are still aiming at the short term, but doing so, they are increasing the dangers for the longer term, that the societies will not be able to cure themselves as fast as they would otherwise do. So basically, in both the media elites and in the society, among the activists in the societies, there is this sort of group mentality, siege mentality, a mentality that we have to respond somehow, very fast, very swift, to side with the Ukrainians. They're, to paraphrase, to use the phrase, they're our sons of the bitch. We know that they might not be telling the truth, but let's stick to their version of the truth. Questioning is not welcomed because a lot of people perceive that, yes, we're now at war as well, so why should we be critical? People want to hear what they approve, again, group mentality, personal attacks, and things like that. So the lack of critical discourse has always been one of the problematic features in the societies, and again, now that we have this very dangerous situation, our response has dangers of just slowing the emergence of it. There's, again, a great deal has emerged already, but now there is a danger that we might be thrown back. Again, then there is another thing. Our discourse, our sort of militarized response to the Russian propaganda is lacking some overlap with what's being discussed in the West. So basically, there are claims produced that the West cannot understand us, they don't want to hear us. It's sort of self-marginalization. It's victimization. There's a great deal of unprofessionalism, just pure unprofessionalism. There was this very stupid story of one of the Lithuanian wire services just putting out a story about the ABSC as OSCE's surrogate invented by the Russians without any questioning, because it appeared somewhere on the Russian wire. So the Lithuanians just translated this without any, without giving it much thought. So basically, yes, if we think of media freedom as the soft spot, the weak spot for the West, because of course the media are inclined to give a sort of a similar hearing to the both truth and the lies. Yes, it is a weakness, but it's sort of a short weakness. The Western press cannot deal with the propaganda appropriately. But in the long term, we all know that it's sort of one of the pillars, one of the strengths of the society. So my problem is that, again, as was told in the morning, we have to accept that we might lose in the short term. We have to just accept that. But we need to focus on the long term. And of course, it's then up to the militaries to protect us in the short term. And in the short term, we can afford to lose, but probably the fact that we have this discussion a quarter century after our liberation, after our independence, and we still lament the status of our societies, shows that we're not exactly successful in shoring up our strengths in the long term as well. So we'd rather not shoot ourselves in the foot now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vykintai. We ended up with the propaganda dilemma, I think, and two panelists to your left, I think, could elaborate a lot on that. So let's try
me.
Fixing into 10 minutes.
Okay. Yep. You know, people talk and you start thinking more, and then it's, you know, it's expands. Thank you very much, Vykintas, for the framing of the Russian narratives and what kind of Russian narratives is. I would just add very shortly to your as addition, for starting the discussion, that the Russian narrative is anti-modernity. I mean, modernity is moving in the world quite, you know, in different pace, and there are some places in the world where it moves faster than the other places of the world, and there are some groups which want to stick to the non-modern things, and Russia exploits that very well. Okay, my name is Mykolas Katkus. My background is business, social, and occasional and longer before dabbling with political communications, where I spent 15 years of my life. Now, first of all, we are speaking in an event organized by the Defense College, but I find the concept of information warfare a bit troubling to my mind. I mean, from one hand, it's very nice because that mobilizes us and says, look, something is going on and we need to act fast. You know, it's a war. It's a war going on. You know, it's a particularly mobilizing thing, and it's good that it makes us do something. At the same time, it's a very dangerous metaphor because it involves us into two things which I see as particularly troubling. One thing, it makes us focus in what is happening right now. So there is a war going on, and what the others are doing. You know, what kind of warfare, war events they're actually making, and we need to focus on them right now, and think only about the current moment. While the processes in the society, you know, there are some things, especially during the crisis of the things which happen in Ukraine, the military things, when this information warfare is really, it's what it is. It's warfare. It's, you know, deception. Is disseminating false information, contra-propaganda, and things like this. But honestly, it's it's not always what is happening. I mean, most what our societies are dealing with things which are medium or long-term things. Well, I talk about medium things. I talk about shaping narratives through the media, as Vykintas has just described, shaping various narratives through the media. These narratives, which Mr. Lukas has described recently as fascism, failed state, and fear that NATO will not come here. They can probably find some other messages, other ways to frame it, but I find this framing quite interesting. At the same time, other thing which is also very important is the longer-term measures, which I would call the paradigm shifting. I mean, if you find this jargon too troubling, I would say that narrative is a story, is a fairy tale, while the paradigm is the book where this fairy tale is headed. And when we talk about things like paradigm shifting things, you should think about we should think about the way we tell the story, the way which story emerges, and this is where we talk about the shaping of a historical memory. We talk about things like values. We talk about the public education system, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So I think that if information warfare means just focusing on what is going on right now, I think it's wrong. I think we need to expand our focus to a bit more further things. Also, what is also very much important, that if we are focusing a bit on medium and long-term things, we need to have ways to measure it, because information warfare, and this is what I've talked with people from strategic communications part of military. They say that information warfare is very hard to measure because it happens very fast, and basically decepts. Something is happening and we need to act fast. And yes, it's crisis management. But when you talk about things like, for example, concepts like loyalty to your own country, and I understand that this concept probably might not be the only concept which you can focus on, but basically the loyalty to the state is I would say, is a good concept, not the least because this concept, loyalty concept, has been very well researched when there are things talking on like loyalty to brands, loyalty to places where you live, loyalty to companies, loyalty to friends, and there is a lot of data about this loyalty. And when you measure loyalty, you need to think about usually several corresponding factors which well, makes this loyalty happen. So you measure, are people loyal to this state, and are they loyal to the other state? So basically or they are less loyal to the state and more loyal to the other state. And we, particularly in the Baltics, we live in a place where loyalties are, mixed and fluid. So we have a younger generation of people who are loyal to European Union, probably even more than they are loyal to Lithuania or nation-state concept. While a lot of older people, as Nerijus said, they're loyal to the youth and they are loyal to the Soviet Union, even maybe not everything was happening there, but we also have some loyalties. So this, and also we have national minorities, Russians in Latvia and Estonia, and Poles in Lithuania, who are loyal to other concepts, which also might be, Ruski Mir concept maybe, or Kremlin, or how you shape that. So I think that starting to understand the loyalties, understand the things that influences the loyalties to one or another construct, I think is very, very important thing. And I think this is the actual map of a warfare, if we call it warfare, we need to be facing and measuring on. A second thing I do not like particularly about the warfare thing is that when we were talking about paradigms, I mean warfare metaphor, it makes us think that if the enemy did something, how we're going to react. What's our next move? They did this, what we're going to do. The problem is that as you have seen in a previous presentation in a previous session, Russian narratives and Russian country is very, very different from the Western country, and they live in their own paradigm, and we cannot play their game better at their chess table. So we need to try to invite them to our chess table and see how we play. And we do not need to analyze too close to them to start playing by the rules, because I've seen this phenomenon happen, that people, remember the story in The Lord of the Rings when Saruman was looking too closely at the Sauron's moves, in the darkness, and so he was totally clear that he understood Sauron very well, but at some point he said that, oh, I need to act as Sauron does act. I need to counter him with his own ways. So we don't need to play this game. I think we need to have our own game, and our own game is we need to measure our society, understand our societies very well, have very measurable results and facts how we are shaping, and we need to understand that Russian military army is not ideal. It's corrupt and it's not working very well. At the same time, Russian propaganda machine is not very ideal. Current propaganda machine has been born during the political fights in the post-Soviet Russia, and current people who are heading this propaganda machine, at least from what I know, also have roots in the electoral campaigning and Putin's various re-election campaigns and things like this. And yes, they are very skilled at manipulating the Russian post-Soviet mentality. But the problem is that Baltic states are not that post-Soviet as we were like 20 years ago, and we are still different setup of press. And what I noticed, and I met these guys and seen them at work, they are not always very effective in the different mentalities. So some of the things we do, are stupid, and some of the things we do, they think that it might work, but it's not going to work. So we don't need to idolize them and think about them. I think we need to follow our own things which are very important for them, focusing on things like how to create, how to go out of the information bubble of social minorities and things like this. So that was my 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to start from the analysis of Soviet and contemporary textbooks on propaganda, which was and are edited in Soviet Union and Russia. And on my opinion, in order to understand what's going on, we need at least to read some researches of local Russian authorities and intellectuals on propaganda. And if you will take Soviet propaganda textbooks, researches, monographs, you could find some very interesting features. One of them, actually, they call themselves that it is scientific propaganda. But what does mean scientific in this case? Actually, they use a lot of elements of description of so-called society. But what does mean society in this case? Because they describe society only or as masses, or as crowds, or as leaders, or classes, or nations. It means they never used the concept of, for example, civil society, or they even don't like such kind of concept like diversity, civic diversity. They never work with civic diversity. In order to persuade, they need to transform civic diversity into some kind of crowd or masses, and then started to work with this group of people. Then actually they understood and understand propaganda as institutional persuasion, coercive persuasion for political power reasons. And it means that not all persuasions are considered as useful for propaganda. And it means only through the state or party participation in persuasive process could be get propaganda effect. Then ordinary, they use that concept of mobilizing of masses or crowds for some kind of reason. And for mobilizing purposes, they could use the number of very different instruments, even very modern, for example, like consumer society, or the spectacle society, or infotainment, and or boiling cattle, or that influenced this boiling cattle in order to get explosions, social explosions. Ordinarily, they use as well as concepts propaganda and counter-propaganda, but never use concept of anti-propaganda. Anti-propaganda means that destruction both, and propaganda and counter-propaganda action. It happened, for example, one of the first time in French Paris Revolution between international situationists. They used some kind of technique, determinment, which presupposed that every time we turn off the same ideas, and we could use in creative way or in performative way, in artistic way, the same ideas or new ideas in order to resist and propaganda and counter-propaganda. In French international situation, in this case, it was resistance for both for American propaganda and for French propaganda as well, in order to escape from different influence. And I think that is its weakest side of contemporary Russian propaganda, that they probably they don't consider anti-propaganda as a problem. And I would say this is the reason to answer why Maidan was not under influence of massive Russian propaganda. I was in Maidan in November and December last year. And for me, it was very interesting that in this period, Russian TV and channels show endless reportage about, how terrible is Maidan and this EU and the United States, and why this association couldn't be signed. But you know that these people in Maidan were completely free, from Kremlin persuasion. And the question was, and asked them, how could you resist? And the answer was very simple. We are civic diversity and we are civil society. And they do propaganda for masses, but we are not masses and we are not crowds. So they couldn't take us as a propaganda object, and they completely, 2 million of people who came from time to time to Maidan Square, they were completely free from Russia propaganda, so far as that all in this Yanukovych time, all Ukrainians TV except few internet channels were in the side of Moscow, and it was double pressing on Maidan from Moscow TV channels and all propaganda, and from local Ukrainian propaganda. But Maidan's people were completely free from this persuasion. And how it's happened, why it's happened, they did few elements for resistance. Then first of all, they organized civic resistance against persuasion. It means that they all time try to explain for people what does mean this one or the another information. Then they have two scenes. You remember one big scene where which worked 24 hours per day, and then a smaller scene which calls Open Maidan University, which worked for the educational purposes. And what people done in Maidan in another time, they always talk and talk and talk between each other, This talking between each other, this endless, continuous dialogue was guarantee resistance for very, very coercive and massive propaganda attack. It means that if you will build, this example show, and another example, this group of Voina from Moscow and another artist, they are also under complete Pussy Riots. It's only part of this group Voina and other similar movements in Moscow, the same in Minsk, and they are completely free. These people, artist people, completely free from persuasion, state persuasion. And how it's happened? How they could resist? And another answer is they do it through anti-propaganda actions. That it means they distract all-time persuasive discourse in order to build diversities, new and new diversities. And building new and new civic diversities, enough instrument in order to resist coercive pro-Soviet propaganda. Why it's happened? Why it's so weak, I would say, Russian propaganda? Look, that it's very massive propaganda. If you will check TV channels, you will see how boring it is, because all channels show the same. It's very massive. They repeat the same information tens and hundreds of times. But it's very boring because there is no diversity. And from the other side, if you will build some artistic or the diversity and through civic instruments, you could resist this massive propaganda. And because contemporary Russian experts mostly use the same paradigm which came from Soviet time about propaganda, that we need to propagate and manipulate and mobilize masses, crowds, or leaders, But if you don't have masses, If you don't have, these crowds, but you have a number of different groups with a different social interest, this is your strongest side, and you could resist. Resist against propaganda. Then a couple last moments. One of them, it's this propaganda, which I would say Russian propaganda is very monological. Monological, it means that this authoritarian power and this style of government in Russia is used in propaganda case as well. It means that this propaganda isn't creative. If you will see that number of bloggers found mistakes in fakes in photoshops immediately after publishing. Because why it's happened? Because this monological approach everywhere, and this authoritarian approach for the propaganda doesn't presuppose creativity. This propaganda is not very creative. If you will opposite to this propaganda your creativity, you will win. You will win in this battle, but for this reason, what is necessary? Not to repeat the same messages. Not to repeat the same messages, like, for example, very often, sometimes even in Lithuania, like you hear today about Germany, sometimes TV channels and news agencies, they start to repeat Russian information broadcasting. And this repetition, it means that you follows their own purposes. You don't need to repeat, but to create something new. That is very important, and this is the case in order to explain how Maidan or how creative people, how Voina people or the other could resist massive propaganda. Just not very difficult, but it's possible through anti-propaganda and the civic diversity current. Thank you.
Thank you, Gintautai. I consider your concept of anti-propaganda really interesting and underestimated, and I think we can take it later into discussion maybe. Yes, Raul, the time is yours, please.
Thank you. On the 2nd and 3rd of May, I think 2007, there was a very impressive NATO PSYOPS conference in Tallinn. It's only a few days after Bronze Soldier. And there were probably 25 reports, and one of them about Russia. 2007. Now we are living 2014, and we don't understand how naive we were in these days, because it was quite obvious that it's going to hell in Russia. And Russia was considered in most countries in these days, like Clinton said once about Saudi Arabia, that country with a potential democracy, which is very funny, really. And now we are living 2014, and let's imagine ourselves at 2020. And let's look back at 2014, the same 7 years, and think, are we smart enough to understand what's going on now in Russia? Do we analyze it properly in a scientific way? I'm actually not sure. Working in this, with information wars theory with 17 years, now I like more the cognitive war term. I have to say that it's surprising even for me what's going on now in Russian media after Crimea or Sochi Olympic Games. And it's not media anymore. It's media in a technical terms. I mean, they're using technical things to make content, but it's not media content anymore what is there. So we have to respond somehow. And Pavlovsky said I think 10 years ago, said that, what is media? Media is a technical tool to bring your jokes to village. It's nothing more. It's a Russian attitude. It's not free media, what we are talking about. We can't solve this problem with simply arguing, because it's two different worldviews. There are a lot of things we can't solve, and it's a level of emotions. If we take situation in Estonia, where 30% almost are Russian-speaking, and more than 70% of them get their main information from 3 Russian channels, RTR, NTV, and PBK. And we know the content, so actually now it's real that we are living in 2 information societies. And if we put 3 simple questions, we tested it, and the questions are, was Crimea annexation or liberation? Is Russia state or civilization, like Dugin says? It's something very big, it's different, it's New East, it's Держава, whatever it is. It's not state, normal state. And who is your president? And when the answers are that it was liberation, Russia is a civilization, it's not state, and my president is Putin, this problem is not possible to solve. Because it's so deep, it's so emotional, and with arguing, you don't change it. Ukrainian theoretician Potsepsov is using for this kind of phenomena term national mega events, which mean that it's deep in your soul. You can't change, for example, the meaning of Holocaust to Jews. You can't explain to a Jew that the Holocaust was nothing, just forget it. Or let's try Katyn with the Polish. Or let's try, I don't know, genocide is Armenians, it's 100 years next year. Or, and it will last 600 years, let's try the Kosovo Polia with the Serbs, or deportation with Estonians. So, we don't solve this problem with the talking. It's deep in our hearts, which means that this is a problem we are working on now. And it's extremely difficult. I could explain a little bit Estonian experience. It's not possible to solve fast, probably takes generations. Last week, Estonian government adopted the direction to Russian language channel, which called TV3. And it was fierce debate. There were pro and contra arguments, but we have to be grateful to Putin and especially Kiselyov about the idea of making this Sputnik, which is the chain of channels which is directed to 39 countries or whatever, including Estonia. So, and I tell a few words about the ideology of this thing because, you know, Estonian language channel in Estonia, well, I mean Russian language channel. And a lot of people say, it's impossible. Nobody is going to look at it. It will be zero audience. Russians are afraid of Estonian part propaganda, and it's a dead idea. But there is one point which Moscow can't do, and it's built up Estonian-Russian identity. Everyday life. Probably the target group in the first year, maybe it's 25–30%, no more, because older generations, they are living definitely, like you told here, about Soviet time, because the Russian modern channels' main idea is to keep alive, not Russian, but Soviet Union nostalgia. It's a very smart and clever turn Soviet, and which means that this channel, maybe it's starting September or next year, maybe 1st January 16, it's going to slow years and years built up the relations. It's not media simple terms, it's relations between Russian society. It's a meeting point. And media, as a technical tool, is playing now a completely different role like it was, I don't know, early years. Which means that we counted that probably 500 to 700 Russian elite or just experts or just interesting people go through this channel during 1 year, but it's probably 2,000 or 3,000 in 3 years. Of course, it's very difficult to explain to politicians what it is. It's a very professional, I mean, TV programming is a highly competitive and professional thing, so we can't solve this problem just by opinions. It needs scientific approach, and I hope we will be very smart. So, my message is, this is war what is not possible to win with the simple ways. It will take years and years. And from my point of view, very long, very cold war is a good option.
So on that pessimistic note, I take it as
this was optimistic.
I take it as a provocation for discussion. I invite you to join in with questions, and then let's go into the topic deeper, please. If it's for a specific speaker, could you address the question? Okay, thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. Margareta Hjertnes is my name, and I do research in information warfare. And it's a rather general question, because you've been very much focused on traditional media. What I see is more and more focus on the internet. And my personal explanation for Maidan, why Maidan held together ideologically, I guess, or held against the propaganda, is because we have so much more different information points today. So you have all the pro-Maidan groups, various Maidan groups. So you do not have to rely on what's said in TV. You do not have to rely on what is written on the papers. You go online and you pick your information. The other things that I see is that Russia is able to utilize that. Russia is being able to utilize the various groups by inserting relatively small narratives and let them grow from there on. So I would like to hear some general comment on social media.
Nicholas, I think you have, and Raul.
Great. The decline of the traditional media is fantastic. I mean, and the problem with narrative is there. And this problem is not only faced by the political or social or military scientists, it's a problem faced by everyone who works with narratives. The problem is that earlier you had a print media article, which was a story, and basically the story was started and finished, and basically had the whole story was in there. Currently, the story has been replaced what the scientists call the layered narrative. That means that you get one layer of narrative from one place, second layer of narrative from the other place, and the third layer of narrative from the other place. I can give you one example. Earlier, a person woke up, he listened to the radio while going to work. Then he read a newspaper while at work. He read some more newspapers or journals during lunchtime. And then in the evening, he went home and watched TV. And that was his whole daily menu. He interacted with people, maybe, but not too much. These days, he gets information immediately. I mean, I think in Lithuania, 26% of young people, first thing they touch in the morning is a phone. So first thing you touch your Facebook status, and then you see what is happening as well. So that creates a bit different narrative, which is called the layered narrative, and this layered narrative is quickly replacing the new narrative. Now, Russia's ruling elite faced it during the 2011 year protests. They were completely underwhelmed with that at the time. They did not know what to do. I was at that time in Kazakhstan, and I have meetings with Russians, and They said we don't know what to do with Navalny. You know, is it censorship? Is it what to do? But when they learn how to play it, and I think that in terms of ruthlessly manipulating this narrative, we are, you know, ahead of, in this technology, we are a bit ahead of Western democracies, which also are doing some catching up. So my point would be that you know, at the same time, the most important thing is not the medium, is not the channel. The most important thing is the story, is the narrative. And as the professor said, you know, if a story is important, it's interesting, it has drama into it. It's not one story, it's not boring when it works.
Yeah, I would like to add a little bit first about internet propaganda and these social networks. Actually, you know that there are a lot of professional agitators and who works professionally for newspapers and TV channels and for the same propaganda purposes in centralized authoritarian power. From the other side, what is very important, I didn't mention, it's emotional side of propaganda. That why I used concept propaganda instead of informational war. Sometimes we separate it. Informational war is related about information on events or infotainment. And propaganda is also oriented to emotional persuasion. It means through using songs, movies, pictures, you know, but without any special information on event. In order to build some political mythology, for example, about Novorossiya, that is much more important to use legends, songs, music than information. It means that battle goes much more stronger on emotional side than on informational side. That is very important, and these new agitators should be very oriented again to emotional this activity. But look at the level of creativity, for example, pro-Ukrainian side of activists and pro-Moscow side of activists. You will see that Ukrainian side are very creative for this making of new songs, pictures, and so on. And this Kremlin side ordinarily use the same pictures from Second World War. Again, it's very boring, you know. All time they repeat and repeat the same and the same, or do answers for the counter-propaganda answers for emotional attacks from Maidanian or Ukrainian side. And the third, I would say that a response to this quite optimistic, pessimistic this vision, I would say that what I see in the Baltic countries, I just remember, I don't understand this defensive position of Baltic countries. I would accept offensive. I mean, offensive in this case, it means that collaborate to find civic groups in Russia, which could be collaborate on the level of building of civic society of diversities. You know, it means I'm talking not about for propaganda purposes, but for the building of democratic freedoms and free speech and the other values of normal society, not Western or normal society. In Russian, this offensive position, if we will do this offensive position, it will be quite interesting and important like Ukrainians do it now. Because you know that, for example, Daugavpils and Narva could be our power, you know, in this case, that they could be ready, you know, could be ready to build new society, new civic ideas between Russians, not to take defensive but offensive position. Think about it, because it's actually new job places.
Why we're talking about traditional media? By researches, Russian population, especially in Estonia, they tend to believe traditional media, which means TV. And maybe after 5-10 years it will change, but at the moment to reach them with the language they hear, it's needed traditional media. Secondly, if we're talking about internet in Russia, are you sure that there will be available free internet after 1 year? And third, we made 2 researches last 2 years about so-called anonymous commentators in Estonia. And it turned to be quite sensational, the outcome that we find out that the number of people who really commenting so-called serial anonymous commentators, it's tiny. And but the impact is too big, so we chose to compete with the science, and I really think we were quite successful 2 years in a row. And we know that there are a lot of so-called somehow targeted comments, which mean that they are specially done by some groups, and especially in Russian language. And it means that we know that there are groups of people in Russia who are really doing, I don't know, maybe tens and hundreds a day, every single day, and we all have Russian language, so online sphere we can interfere. So I would suggest to be quite careful and look what is there really, and the research. What is the content of these internet comments?
Thank you, Raul. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Merle Maigra. I work as the security policy advisor to President Ilves. Thank you for your interventions. I have a question to you. In your speech, you seem to focus more on the current Ukrainian crisis and on the immediate Baltic response. I was wondering, and one of you mentioned that the audiences in the Baltic states and the West are different. However, I was wondering whether you see whether the West as such, as united, could do something more meaningful, something bigger, something comprehensive in standing against the Russian information war, basically. Whether there's room for EU together or the NATO to intensify their action, and if there is something to do, what do you see it could be? One comment I have, which refers to a recent study done by Peter Pomerantsev and Michael Weiss, where they suggest that the underlying issue in this problem is that there is no specific definition given to propaganda. And therefore, the Russian side could claim that everything is propaganda, that there is no differentiation. Between the misuse of facts and normal argumentation, and therefore we need, following the example of Freedom House or Transparency International, set some international criteria to what is propaganda, and therefore so that people then later could pinpoint and make reference to this. What do you think of this idea, and whether you have any other big ideas? Thanks.
If I may steal your question for my answer, I think that's really to the point question and dilemma. And I think I mentioned it, but I would elaborate a bit. I think the biggest challenge is getting Europe and America on board with this issue. Not just, as I say, military boots on the ground, but information footprint in the region. And, well, it was, Putin is a great magician in this kind. He created the mystique of, potential partner and ally. And then we had, people in the West thinking that we don't need anymore all those Cold War tools to tackle, Cold War enemy. Its potential partner. Let's economize on that, and so on. So the probably political narrative here should be that the West should be back with the info tools as well. And now, when you put forward the question of considering what is I don't know whether I'm correctly getting the point, but what is unacceptable from the point of media ops, Russian or Kremlin's media ops in the region, meaning that unacceptable would be propaganda if defined and so on. I think we have already the tools. We are just not using them effectively. In the directive of European Audiovisual Directive, we have, hate speech. We have it under the article. The question is that it was not put forward on the effect. And how I relate this to a kind of energy issues that we went through paradigmically. The same, we considered energy being business. Then we saw that it's not just business for Putin, it's politics as well. Okay, we saw it, we experienced it, and we developed a comprehensive, energy security strategies. And there was mentioning of Ed Lucas of even putting Gazprom to court on the ways they manipulated our legal environment. So this happened for decades, how Russian medias manipulated European media environment for the benefit later of this aggressive propaganda. So that means that we have to reconsider whether European media regulation, the same as with energy, is sufficient to tackle this. And it's the same with the propaganda definition, but the hate speech, war propaganda issues, they are all in the legal formats, so we just need to evoke them, I think.
I have a few, suggestions, probably not be the right word, but as Nerijus said, there are already good examples of policing what needs to be policed, and that's in the UK in the RT's case. We put them on notice that media will not be allowed to media freedom will not be allowed to be abused. So that's there is potential in that, just policing and applying the strictures. That will not stop the spread of alternative versions of reality, conspiracy theories, and stuff like that. But the sort of the hard things like hate speech and warmongering should be stopped by that. Again, probably there should not be much effort on the part of NATO or the EU when it comes to content, because then, again, we would be shooting ourselves in the foot as free societies. But to counter the narrative, not exactly to counter the narrative, but to present anti-propaganda, a different narrative, Western politicians need to ditch the sort of the political correctness and the blandness of their statements. When you have a very sharp, very clear statements that are by themselves a way to counter the spread of false statements and false news. So I think the politicians should be clearer.
A few months ago, there was a story in a Finnish TV where the vice chairman of Hungarian parliament said, "Thank you, Mr. Putin. You gave us idea how we get back our lands from Ukraine through referendum." On the 16th of April, there was a 2-hour program in Finnish TV, 30 experts on different sides in the TV, and they were talking about Russia. It was a so-called Russia evening. And half of them were talking about visa freedom, how to sell wooden houses, and these kind of things. It was quite terrible to see. Merle raised a really vital question. It's how to explain to the Western politicians that it's not joke what is going on there. That don't be naive. There is growing something really big, which could be dangerous to everybody. But of course, if I'm living in Portugal, maybe it's far away and I don't consider it. And I look at it as a tourist attraction point of view, that million tourists a year. So I think at the moment is a very important role from politicians. And we need really smart, intelligent, and in a propaganda ways, knowledgeable people to explain to the West that we are not paranoid Russophobes. We just are closer and see better what's going on there. So there is no big idea just to get West in and work out some common value-based ideologies.
Very little comment. You know that from the Soviet time, they used method of falsification of ideas. Falsification of ideas presuppose that, for example, you remember that in the Soviet time, ordinary propagandists call that this regime, Soviet regime, is very democratic with freedom of speech. And everywhere they declare the same, that this is democracy and even real democracy, but because, you know, the Western don't have a real democracy of people. And this falsification of concepts or washing of content of concepts, you know, it's the very important technique in order to destroy our productive dialogue. We just couldn't have a normal dialogue between each other because somebody between us changed the content of concepts or falsified ideas. And we couldn't have normal speech in this case. And if you will take directly from broadcasting descriptions of propaganda on other concepts, you will be in the situation with falsified ideas. Just we will not have a possibility even to discuss between each other because we will use completely different content of concepts with the same titles. That is why this monological and authoritarian propaganda is so dangerous, because, you know, and the Nazi propaganda, Soviet propaganda, now I found, and the Russian propaganda destroy even possibility to think and to use language.
As for the cultural help which the West will provide us, I am waiting for the next James Bond movie.
Okay, thank you. There are more questions. May I ask, we have 15 minutes, so let's put it in a nutshell with the questions and answers. Yeah, please, and please, yeah. Yeah? And here, okay. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ekaterina Kalin, Swedish National Defense College. I have a question to Mr. Raul. You mentioned Soviet nostalgia and a TV channel. I guess you mean the TV channel Nostalgia, which is connected to Ruski Mir.
No, it's Soviet nostalgia is not in Estonian population. It's in Russian population. But in channels, this is strategy of Moscow channels to create Soviet nostalgia in Russian-speaking population, yes.
Yeah, and my question is if it's working and to which generation is targeted to?
If we divide the Estonian Russian population, Russian-speaking population, into 5 groups, so it's probably working on 55–60%, maybe a little bit more. It's working.
Just a short comment, the same in Lithuania, just recent, it was mentioned by Vykintas. It goes by somewhere 50% even in general population you would have nostalgia. Yeah,
yeah, if I can ask Andrius Kubilius, Member of Parliament. It would be a question or rather some comment, but nevertheless, maybe you will comment on my comment. So really, it's very interesting to listen your discussion about information wars. But perhaps in some way we're still not touching more difficult issue. I mean that to speak about Russian propaganda, it's not so difficult. Of course, Russian propaganda is dangerous for Russian-speaking people in Estonia, in Latvia, at least in some way in Lithuania, in Ukraine. Russian Today or Sputnik is perhaps also making propaganda job in Western community. But it's easy to recognize. It's easy to recognize. You are watching Первый Балтийский канal and you know what does it mean. I mean, either you are accepting or not accepting. I don't know if in Lithuania we have any kind of investigation how Russian propaganda, such propaganda which you can recognize, how much they're influencing ethnic Lithuanian mindset. I think it's not so big influence. Well, I guess, I don't know the data, yeah. But again, this is, I would call, from military point of view, this is like, you know, Grad or Katyusha. You can recognize very easily. Those are the guns, they are, you know, using them, so you can try to defend yourself. But I think that besides that, we cannot avoid questions about what I would say about some kind of hidden, you know, guns which are used. I would speak about Lithuanian national media. Is that influenced or not influenced? How it's used or not used? Because that is much more dangerous when we are speaking about 50% of Lithuanians who are, let's say, saying that ethnic Lithuanians who are saying that Soviet time was better than time of today. And I remember again message of Konstantin Kosachev, who said that the Russian goal of their soft power strategy is to destroy trust among ordinary people towards too much pro-Western elite of those countries. So my question is, shall we discuss this issue or shall we wait till next
No,
time?
I think that the time is good. I just will take a short comment here. I think the question is to the point, but my comment would be to think about that strategically best Russian expert and offensive weapon, as we already mentioned, is corruption. And the thing that we are speaking from anti-propaganda probably perspective is the health of our, you know, civic health, our economic health, and our media environment as well. So the thing probably that is risen here, or that you mentioned, is the way the same money and corruption and you know, diminishes the health of our media and our journalism. And the only way is to work harder and then more effectively on this filter. So I don't know, that's maybe too philosophical, but that's the idea.
One point about Estonia. You raised a very important question, but 4 or 5 years ago, there were much more so-called useful idiots as now. And I think society has worked a lot, and government too. We have so-called highest defense courses where is information war and these subjects are touched. Now 2 years we have so-called state psychological defense courses, and more people and journalists will get the information how they can be influenced. And I really think that at the moment it's not so easy to go through with these really stupid things. And a lot of people follow on a daily basis these kind of phenomena. They are there, but much less than years ago.
One thing I agree probably in Lithuania is also a bit similar situation, that the media environment is getting much better, and I think everybody has noticed, like 5 years ago you couldn't get some messages across, and now it's much easier. And in this case, although it might sound macabre, but you know, I think that in terms of the media environment, what happened in Ukraine for Lithuania was the best thing which could have happened, because now the society is mobilized, and mobilization is a powerful weapon that goes there. Now, a little bit about how Russia works and how there are things. I remember in 2004 there was one guy, Mr. Paksas, who won the Lithuanian elections, and some of his advisors used this tactics, which was widely used, one of his shadow tactics widely used in Russia, that it's called the fake research. So basically you're getting handed a research, and the first question is, do you think that your president should be, and multiple answers possible, strong, young, real leader, able to make decisions, willing to get power. So basically there are 10 qualities of Mr. Paksas, and the second question is whom you will vote for. Is it Mr. Paksas or Mr. Adamkus? And Mr. Adamkus has other qualities which are also very nice, like he's wise and leader who is equal to everybody and so on. But it's his questions, and for undecided voters that was quite a big way. And they have distributed, they say, 1 million of such things. I mean, of course, they have got lost in translation, but it was quite a big thing. Now coming back to what Russia does, to the local populations, it's a bit similar to what Russia today does in USA. There are a lot of various fringe groups with subcultures or with diversions or micro trends, as the public relations guy and the former advisor to Clinton's Mark Penn calls them, the micro groups, micro trends. So there are these groups, small groups like 1-2% who are placing some smaller thing up to their level. And then you ask, and then you support their thinking. For example, now we see Russia very active in these various narratives about great Lithuanian empire, anti-gay movement, some anti-modernity, various initiatives and so on. And then they say, oh, Russia is like that. We are like that. And then you say these 10 qualities, like, do you support this, and that? Yes, I do. And then the second question, so where your loyalty really is? Is it Russia or is it Lithuania? So I think this is what they are very clearly doing, and this is the place where the social media is, at least in Lithuania, for them is particularly handy. It's even probably more important for them than I would say ORT, which is not reaching that much population as we are in other Baltic countries.
I would like to add, that there are so-called humanities and social technologies for war purposes, which are elaborated in contemporary Russia for military purposes. These humanities and social technologies are not propaganda or informational war, but completely another type of approach. It is, for example, working through conflict groups. Development of conflicts through groups activation. Just looking any conflict. That's not important what kind of conflict it could be. Any useful idiots could be used for this one purposes. Even nationalist, even that some kind of any people, and in order to destroy in order to build some kind of so-called boiling kettle, and just to work with this boiling kettle with any groups, and that is a possibility to it's so-called non-lethal weapons. Non-lethal weapons, and they elaborate number non-lethal, lethal weapons, which could be used in such kind societies like Baltic countries, and it is not propaganda as well.
I bring one example, 30 seconds, what was for your story. Our president went ballistic, and with a good reason. It was during Sochi Olympic Games when evening newspaper decided to make a story, 2 pages. If Russia will invade, occupy Estonia again, who from Estonian sportsmen will be good enough to be in a Russian team in Olympic Games? So 2 pages, and this was the huge story. This is typical idiot story.
From Vykintas, and then the last question we have on the line.
I'm actually not that optimistic about the reach of the Russian media, because I think the ground is fertile. The ground in the Lithuanian society ripe for all sorts of conspiracy theories and things brought in by the Russian media. The people are cynical. They don't really feel their political efficacy. They tend to, again, as what I've described, they don't really believe in the institutions. They're not critical. They are parochial. So in this context, despite that the Lithuanian media are mobilized, again, probably not always for the better, but in this case, even the word of mouth that, oh, have you heard this? The Russians are saying something that the Lithuanian media are not reporting at all. This suddenly can spread, and this sort of feeds into the prevailing sentiment about the power, about the world, and about the relations in the world.
Thank you. Andras Schwarz, right now working at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs in Helsinki, but originally from Hungary. I'd like to ask your opinion about, just a short statement. I know the Hungarian, Slovak, and Czech example why Russian propaganda is very effective there. And there is an inertia-related element in that. Most of the younger journalists, they do not speak Russian anymore. So they look for, when they have to produce news about Russia, they look for the English-speaking information on Russia, meaning Russia Today. So there is simply lack of access from the linguistic perspective to the alternative information, but this is the smaller part of the problem. The bigger part of the problem that both in Budapest and Bratislava, the state media agency often takes news from the Russian state news media agency, or in the Hungarian case, often from Novorossiya News. And then they report, according to Novorossiya News Agency, that's the situation in the eastern Ukraine. I mean, the professor's theory about the civic diversity and this resistance potential. Do you see any ways that a civil society could somehow resist or counter the state media agency? Thanks.
It's a question. It's a simple question, whether the editor is professional enough. Yeah, and then that wouldn't happen in the first place. Yeah, but then it happens. I totally agree. Yeah.
Just a short comment. Yes, I tried to mention an example where it was on the Lithuanian newswire. They just took a story from the RIA Novosti and without any question. It's simple unprofessionalism, but that's again what's different in our societies from the Western societies. Journalists are very young. They work for 3 years and then they go on to any other industry. So basically, there's a lack of professionalism in the society. There's still a lack of critical thinking, questioning what the media and the politicians say, and things like that. But then again, I'm sort of surprised. Why would you need to turn to RT when you need an English language source? I mean, I'm editor, and my daily life is newswires. So I never trust neither Russian nor, I'm afraid, Ukrainian sources. Never. So if it's not on the English trusted, the big 3 newswires, I don't report it. So it's as simple as that.
Civil society actually is the best weapon, but we made a structure of Estonian psychological defense 4 or 5 years ago, and in the center there are agreed common values. And if any editor or, I don't know, go against these values, what we defend, then he simply don't survive for a very long time. And we have several channels or newspapers which are definitely contrary these our values, what we defend in this state, and they don't have audience really.
What you mentioned about English sources, actually it's a problem, but I remember just again about Maidan resistance against Russian propaganda. I remember when all TV channels stopped, they have just only 2 very weak internet TV, like Hromadske TV. But what's happened later, because civic solidarity in different countries, that this very small Hromadske TV was translated migrated directly to a number of countries through using YouTube and other possibilities. And it was available in Lithuania, for example, immediately through Delphi. And probably in the other countries, the same Poles did, and later even some companies from United States started to retranslate Hromadske TV. That it shows that if civic society would like, it could organize alternative network. That is completely possible example. But what we are talking, or about civic society and civic activists, or about TV companies, that is quite different thing sometimes, you know. And I remember that one time Delphi, at the beginning when I returned from Maidan, Delphi didn't translate these channels, but I and my friends, we wrote letters to Delphi and asked them, you know, why you, you know that that broadcasting in Poland, they translate these channels, why you didn't do it? That just, you know, we press, civic activists, we pressed Delphi, and Delphi started immediately to work. It means that participation of civic society in defense from coercive persuasion is very important, and only this one way I see that is available to resist strong propaganda. No through, you know, big companies which are oriented to the filters. You remember that Noam Chomsky wrote that there are a lot of different filters which could be used for propaganda purposes, like, for example, source filter, informational source filter, and you will not get even information because you're not under the power of this informational war. And so you see that participation of civic society in this case is obligatory.
And just a very one small remark, media is dying, not only professional media is dying and changing, not only in the Baltic states, it's happening everywhere. I mean, TV ratings drops everywhere. The printed media dies. Newspapers like Newsweek is becoming extinct or coming back. And the problem of unprofessionalism is a big one, and it's a growing one. And if there is someone who is sponsoring this, you know, like China does or Russia does, it is a problem. And probably coming back to what the previous questionnaire said, a person who works with the president, I mean, there will probably should be some kind of filtering mechanism. You know, maybe even an open source filtering mechanism which can help you understand which sources are reliable, which are not. At the same time, most probably, you know, Google or some other company will do that anyway. So it's there. But the fact is that there is a lot of unprofessional journalism, and it's not only the Baltic state problem. It is increasingly becoming obvious elsewhere. I know from my colleagues in all the world.
If I may, I have a wrap-up of this discussion, and then I would like to thank the panelists for interruptions, the discussion participants for questions. Just to take the final thought from Professor Mažeikis' answer is that, you know, activism works everywhere. It works in counter-propaganda as well. And if you see the possibilities of creative action, then use it, and then this is how you can tackle it on the personal level. Thank you all, and thank you for this discussion.